So let's talk about wedging our clay. It is important that we always wedge our clay before we use it. For a couple reasons. We want to get the clay particles really working together, get them activated, but we also want to get out any air that is in our clay. So this piece I just cut directly off of a block of clay. Actually, I just cut my block of clay up and made a bunch of um, balls out of it that I wedge. So this is the last one I have left. Normally, I would not wedge on my wheel. However, in my studio here, the space that I normally wedge on is being used for something different right this moment. So I'm just going to wedge directly on my wheel. If you have another area, a plaster piece of plaster works really good for this. I do have a plaster that I do use for wedging. Um, a piece of canvas works well for this also. Um, that's what I suggest that you use, and use a table, a wedging table or a regular table or even the floor. My floor won't really work here because I have up foam. I have those foam squares on the floor, so it's not really feasible for wedging either. So this is the hardest surface I could come up with right this moment. So this is why we are wedging on the wheel. So I do have a bat on the wheel because I would not want to wedge directly on the wheel because it has these circles in it that are that would leave those little rings in my clay, and I know they wouldn't stay there, but they could also potentially add air back into the clay. So I want to make sure my surface is nice and flat and not use anything that's going to hinder my wedging process in any way. So you do want to make sure that your clay is a really good consistency. If it's too wet, it's just going to stick to the surface that you are using to wedge on. And if it's too dry, you're gonna have a really hard time wedging it. So this is a really good consistency that I have right now. I can manipulate it with my hands very easily. Um, and it's very moldable at this point. That's what I want. When I start wedging, this is obviously like more of a rectangular type of shape. I just kind of compress my, oops, I kind of compress my corners down um, and get a little bit more rounded shape to it. I just do that by setting it or by, I'm not hitting it really hard. I'm just kind of throwing it down a little. I don't want to throw it like I'm throwing on the wheel because then it's going to stick to my back. But now I have it in a little bit more round of a shape. Kind of looks like pepper. Um, All right, so what I'm doing is when I start by wedging, I'm using this part of my hands here and my fingers. So when I'm doing this, I'm pushing with this part of my hand. And you can see the indentions that I just made right there by pushing with those parts of my hands. So I'm pushing, and then I use my fingers to like roll the clay back up towards me. And I continually do that. I push, I roll it. I push, I roll it. And I'm kind of like pushing it as I push it, I roll it back up on the I would call it the nose part of it because when we make this, the one I'm doing right now is a ram shape. So to me, this would be the nose. Um, but as I'm doing this, I'm pushing it down, but I'm also pushing it out away from me. If I push it too far down, it's going to do this. And I don't want that. This is more of a skull shape. That's not what I want. Let me get it back. I also want to work quickly with this because I don't want it to dry out too much. And the more I touch it, the more my hands are pulling the moisture out of the clay. Also, my bat is pulling the moisture out of the clay as well. So I want to try to work as quickly as possible with this. So let me just get it back into a little more of a round shape. All right, so I push. As I push again, I'm not pushing really, really hard because I can do this over and over and over again. I don't have to push really, really hard. um, the other thing is if I push really hard and then I fold it back up, I'm introducing more clay into or more air into the clay. That's why I'm making little movements as I do it. It's just a little push and a little turn, a little push, a little turn. Now, I said that this time for this process, I'm making a ram's head. So when I do this enough times, we get what is called a ram's head. So this would be the snout and face of the ram. And then you see here, you kind of get this idea of the horns off of the ram's head. So this is a ram's head. From here, I can put it into the ball. And if I feel like it's wedged enough, I am done with it. However, if I don't feel like it's wedged enough, I could set it back down, do my ram's head again, then put it back into the ball. So that was a ram's head. Now let me show you what a conch shell looks like. You're going to do the same method. The difference with the conch shell is it seems like when you when you roll it back up, you kind of tilt it to the side a little bit. So I do my initial push, I roll it up, and I tilt it to my left hand. So I roll it up, and again, I'm tilting it towards my left hand a little bit, and this is what I end up with. This is why it's called a conch shell, because you can see it has that kind of conch shell shape to it. And I tend to do this one more when I know I'm going to throw, because when I'm done with it, I will pat it together in more of a cone type of shape, especially if I'm doing larger pieces. I'll do it that way, it leaves it in this cone type of shape. So that way, when I do go to throw, I can throw it down and I already have started with this cone shape. So either one is perfect. But if I know I'm going to use the clay to throw with, I tend to do the conch shell. And if I am not sure if I'm throwing or if I'm uh, hand building or slab rolling or anything like that, I'll put it into a circle. Let me show you the conch one more time. I'm starting with my piece of clay. Again, little pressure, pulling it. As I pull towards me, I kind of tilt it to my left. You can tilt it to your right, depending on whatever way you want to tilt it. Just make sure you go the same way each time. So tilting to my left, I'm doing my little push again, pulling up, push, up, push, up. And again, every time I pull it up, I'm bringing it, I'm kind of tilting it back down. You'll see like a natural, like, um, uh, lines start to appear here where you can tell you're pulling it back, or where it just feels like it wants to fall onto. So again, there's my conch shell. From this point, I will flatten out my bottom a little. I can do this even if I'm putting it into a ball, but I do it more when I'm throwing. Here's my conch shell. Happy wedging. The other thing I do want to say is when you are wedging, I try to wedge um, several pieces at one time, so that way I'm not wedging a piece, then I throw it, and then I have to go back and wedge it again, throw on the wheel, wedge again. So I just wedged um, 7 balls, and I put them in a bucket to store them. However, if you don't have a bucket, that's okay. At least put them in a plastic bag. Even while I'm wedging the other pieces, I don't let pieces just sit out. So as soon as I wedge them, I put them in the bucket. I cover the bucket up. I want to keep as much moisture in it as possible. So I make sure that I put plastic on top of it and then put the lid on it as I'm wedging the other pieces of clay. I don't want to give that clay a chance to dry out. I want it to be just as perfect when I go to throw it, just as moistured when I go to throw it as it was when I was wedging it.